Hello and welcome to the Vedic Conversation, where each episode we take a different topic and look at it through the lens of storytelling and from the perspective of the Veda, an ancient but still very much relevant body of knowledge from India. I'm Rory Kinsella, a Vedic meditation teacher based here in Sydney, and I'm joined by my Vedic colleagues Anthony Thompson in London and Derrick Yanford in New York. And in this episode, which is the last of season 3, we're revisiting one of the most interesting parts of the discussion from a couple of weeks ago. This week, we'll be delving into the question, what is spirituality? What does the word mean? Do we consider what we do as spiritual? And how does spirituality and religion relate? So sit back and enjoy the discussion.
So, Derrick, I was really interested in a point that you were very subtly making, which is your aversion to the word spirituality or spiritual. And I'm just wondering whether it's the word or is it actually the concept? What's going on there?
Great question. I think both. And I think maybe spirituality's relationship with the word religion and or the images of that conjures with God. Especially I think because I was raised Roman Catholic. And so even the word religion for me right now kind of can have a negative connotation. And then spirituality, I feel like, is popular and has been thrown around in a lot of different ways. And I don't know that I know what it means. And so my tendency is to not use a word when I don't actually know what it means. And then being clumped in with other podcasts and other things that I've heard where Vedic meditation teachers or other types of meditation teachers are labeled as spiritual leaders and spiritual guides. And I don't consider myself to be one. You know what I mean? So that's why I think I don't use it. When I'm speaking to my students, when I talk about myself, I do not include spirituality as part of my definition.
Do you use the word God?
Yes, and I use the word God usually because I'm asked that question, like, what is God? Or do I believe in God? And so, yes. And also, I think because that word, from my understanding, has so many different meanings, and that it's a place to say, I at least know how to parlay my way from God or whatever you call God or whatever your term for that word is, because I think God is a term more people are aware of and have some kind of narrative around more than spirituality, especially because religions. And so that's the other thing too, is like the religion versus spirituality. Can you be both? Is it one or the other kind of a thing? And so I guess, Anthony, I'm curious, like what would you say spirituality is for you?
Well, I think spirituality, I would agree with you that spirituality is, for most people, interwoven with religion and the concept of religion. And perhaps if one was brought up in a particular faith, the only people that you would ever come across who might be considered to be spiritual would be from that church, from that faith. And my family was not religious. I went to a school where religion was voluntary, i.e., you could choose which services you wanted to go to, which was kind of quite interesting. And I remember, it's predominantly Christian, and I was confirmed at the age of 14, and then a small group of us would have Holy Communion outdoors with a master who was a priest but wasn't the chaplain for the school. And this was in a very beautiful part of the country in the southwest England. And on a Friday night, he would get one of the school minibuses, and 10, 12, 14 of us would pile into this vehicle. And he would take us off to an Iron Age fort. And we'd climb up to the top of it, and the sun would be setting, and we'd have Holy Communion up there and prayers. I mean, what could be, what a delightful religious, in inverted commas, experience, or it was without inverted commas, it was a delightful experience. And so I've been fortunate, I've never had what I would call the oppressive religious overtone, which for many people is very forbidding. It's very, it's based on fear. It's administration by fear. If you don't do this, this will happen to you. Mm-hmm. And in a little village that I spent some time in, the church there has had a number of vicars, and I look around at these really very lovely people, friends and neighbours, and a question that often crosses my mind is, are they religious only on Sunday? Are they Sunday spiritualists? Are they Sunday religious people? What's going on between Monday and Saturday? And I think this is a very important point, because I think spirituality has no defined physical location. You don't have to go to a place to be spiritual. And that in fact the place is within. That the spirituality, which I believe everybody has, just like increased consciousness, it's waiting to be revealed, to come out into the open. And I think that I've read books about spiritual people. I've met one or two people that I would consider to be spiritual. And I think the overriding impression I have of their character is that they are very centered. They know who they are, and they know their place in the world. And so you come away with this impression of somebody who has a very strong foundation, which may be still work in progress, but there is a kind of clear-sightedness, a purity in their understanding, which then comes across in their communication and in the way they behave, which can be delightful, but equally can be off-putting, because, as you say, Derrick, recently, spirituality is in a sense being commodified, and it's a kind of a label which perhaps gets used a little too often, a little bit like the other label, which I find strange. Everybody's a hero. Everybody's a hero, or a warrior, possibly a warrior and a hero. These expressions get used too frequently, and in a sense, the value of the word diminishes as a result. But I think, if you look at somebody like the Dalai Lama, who's definitely a very spiritual person, he has a great sense of humor. And that's a characteristic that I've noticed, that people who are spiritual don't take themselves too seriously, and they're not weird. I went to a sort of yoga conference, sort of health and well-being conference, a fair where there were lots of different people. There was even, can you believe it? There was orgasmic meditation being offered. There was tummy button meditation, where you kind of used an instrument to kind of rub your navel. It was most bizarre, and there were a lot of people there who were just weird. Most people would have gone in there and just said, "Who are these people? They look odd. they're doing odd things and they're kind of saying odd things. I can't relate to them. And I think, some people, that's a journey they want to take, and good luck to them. But you're not really doing mankind much good if you're so strange that people can't really relate to you. And I think, the Dalai Lama, whether you are a follower of him or not, you will nevertheless always be charmed and amused, and will always smile at some of the things he says and some of the jokes he makes. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but a sense of humor strikes me as being a really important thing, because it indicates that and often it's self-deprecating humor, that the person speaking isn't taking themselves too seriously, that they feel very comfortable in their own skin, and that they've worked things out. And I think that's an important point. I think I'll just leave it at that for the moment.
Yeah, it's very interesting how you talk about being relatable, and I think we'd all agree that selling spirituality is doesn't seem that relatable. And I don't think you'd find on any Vedic meditation teacher's website like a call to action which would be become more spiritual. It's like, get better at sleeping, reduce stress, very kind of practical ways in, rather than get more spiritual. Whereas I guess it's something that you find further on in the journey. Like, I got into it because I wanted to develop myself, and it was like a kind of hack. Say it's a way to be a bit better at stuff. Kind of a very worldly way in, but then once you're kind of in, there's no denying that there's this big category sitting over it. For example, our podcast is in religion and spirituality, for example. Or if we wrote a meditation book, it would be under mind, body, and spirit in the bookshop. There's kind of no denying that there's this category, but it doesn't really sit with what we do, because it's maybe this is a product of us being in the early 20th century and religion having faded out for many people in the 20th century in the West, and it being this kind of thing that we're a bit weird about. And maybe this is why meditation is increasing in popularity, because there's that gap there where people aren't getting any of that internal experience, and that's, I think, Anthony, you already mentioned it. Like, what is spirituality? It's one way to talk about it would be internal things rather than external things. Like, in meditation, we contact that inner part of ourselves, so we can say, right, the spiritual is things that are internal rather than external. So not is it raining today, but how do I feel inside? And then that becomes things like, how do I derive my happiness? Do I derive it from how I feel inside, or do I derive it from things that I own? And this is, I guess, something that meditators, or me as a meditator, didn't get into this to get, but you kind of find yourself doing that. And then that would link in very much with lots of religious concepts of, happiness is within, is kind of a very general thing, which would probably be in most belief systems. And it's like you kind of find yourself there and go, oh, it was spirituality after all. But it's maybe not what we got into it for. And it's not that it's I guess what scares people off about religion and spirituality as a genre is maybe it kind of implies a belief system, and we don't want to be, don't tell me what to do, keep your 10 commandments, that kind of, I don't want to be bossed around, this is me, this is internal of me, don't tell me what to do, but the result is that you end up having those same beliefs that people throughout the ages have, because once you get rid of all the external stuff, that's just where you get to. And where you get to is, that root of many religions is we're all one. External stuff is all superficial differences, and we're all one. We're all this one. We might call it a one field of consciousness. We might call it a quantum field if we were trying to be scientific, or this is kind of how I explain it. I'll say, and some people will call it the unified field of quantum physics. Some people might call it God. Some people might call it your soul. So I think it's useful, or I find it useful to offer different versions for people. It's like, as teachers in general, it helps for us to talk different people's languages. Like, here's a visual example, here's let me tell a story for you oral people, or let's move around for you kinesthetic people. It's kind of good to say, well, maybe it's God, if that means something to you. I think, Derrick, you mentioned that as well. And also there's I don't know if you've read the book, Sam Harris's Waking Up book. I think the subtitle, he's a US neuroscientist. He's got he's got a podcast, but yeah, his book Waking Up, I think the subtitle is something like spirituality without religion, or something like that. And he talks about how it's more about, it's your internal subjective experience, and no one can tell you anything about that apart from yourself. But he kind of goes, I invite you to go within and see what's going on. And the way he talks about it is, spirituality is kind of like, you will find that the ego part of you starts to go away, in favor of, more, I guess, bigger concepts, wider concerns, so that you find that if you're less egocentric, you're less concerned about your position in the world and those external things that I was talking about. And that I guess I've seen that in students and myself, and that it's hard. I would never use the word spirituality, but that is kind of, you can't deny that that's it. But as kind of small business people, we have to be careful about how we describe things, because it puts people off. But it's it's a fascinating subject.
I think it's really interesting. I think you touched on a very interesting point, which is that in religion, as you say, that a lot of religions have rules, and one of the fascinating things about Vedic meditation is that we have no rules. Actually, we only have one rule, which is don't try to meditate. That's the only rule. Everything else is up for grabs. And what we're doing is kind of helping the student who has acknowledged that perhaps change is something that they would like to embark on. I mean, nobody's going to start a meditation course thinking that everything's going to be the same. They're expecting some change, whether that be small or profound. And we're setting them up on that path to discover those essential elements, as you said, which are within. They're not external. And we're not putting those ideas into their mind. We're just indicating paths that they may take, or routes. And when we get the feedback, we say, now you're beginning to notice this. This is what is happening. And so it's a period of self-exploration, which is very gentle and not dramatic, and it's gracious. And I think another thing that I notice is that, there's a degree of humility also involved in this. I mean, you always come across people who have a degree of spiritual superiority, if you like, or one-upmanship, or there's a degree of arrogance attached to it, and it's extremely unattractive. And I think that's what puts people off. But it's when you come across people who are humble and gracious, and operating with dignity, that it's not about them. Even if they're a teacher, it's not about them. And as you say, it's the ego just gently melts away, And, you know, I always remember when I first set up my business, a friend of mine said, are you going to be the sage on the stage or the guide on the side? And it's a great question. It's a great question. Because, you know, when you look at teachers, why the question I always ask, because I take classes almost every day from somebody, whether it's a personal trainer or yoga, Pilates, weightlifting, whatever it is. I always ask the question to myself of why are you a teacher? Why are you a teacher? And so often the answer comes back pretty quickly that they're in it for some personal transformation, that they need the platform, they need the audience, they need the setup to engender, to power that change, that they can't do it on their own. They need the audience. They need the reflected glory, if you like. They need possibly adulation, adoration to get there. And I think that's completely back to front. I think, you know, people who just quietly go about their business and go down that path on their own, do their own work quietly, maybe reach out once in a while for a little bit of help, then they arrive somewhere and people will be instantly attracted to them. Because, you know, we live in a, you know, I was just talking to somebody this week about employing somebody to come and help me. And she said, well, you know, this is a Gen Z, Gen Z, Generation Z. And she said, of course, you do realize that, you know, most people of that generation are a little bit work shy, that they feel very entitled, that they won't, you know, do things voluntarily, and they always expect to be paid and this, that, and the other. And of course, another feature of that generation, and we're talking about people in their, perhaps in their 20s, is that they are very, very good at detecting something that is artificial. Their bullshit detectors are finely tuned. And if there is a whiff of something that is not authentic, they're turned off. And they're looking for authenticity because so much of their life they've been surrounded by bubbles and half-truths and false, you know, fake news, whatever you want to call it, but falsehoods. And the students of that age group who come to me, they're looking for something that's real. They want the real deal. They're not interested in all the tinsel and the hot air, which is very readily available and very attractive to people. And you know, those people will get a big audience. Why? Because that's what the audience wants. But we're operating at a different level of consciousness. And, you know, the way all Vedic meditation teachers promote themselves is quite demure. It's very dignified. It's very quiet. We're not making huge statements, you know. And people come and they engage with us and they like what they see and hear. They like the technique and they think, okay, this is something that I could do. And that's the beginning of the possibility of that spiritual journey that Rory was talking about.
I mean, I've been considering the answers to these questions for a little bit, and I feel fortunate that I've been listening. I don't know if you guys listen to Oprah's Super Soul Sundays podcast. She has a lot of great people on there, and at the end she usually asks about the same questions, and she asks, what's spirituality, what's religion, what's the difference? And everybody has a little bit different of an answer. So it's been in my brain for a while, and the best thing that I can come up with, my working definition and how to compare and contrast the two, is that I look at it this way, that both are roadmaps of one sense or another, and religion being a roadmap that was created by a collective group of people that tell you, okay, the road is a one-way road, you stop here, this field is over here, it's kind of laying out the terrain, but also the way in which you should navigate it. Because if you do it in this way, you're going to be able to have a greater understanding of the relationship between you, yourself, the tangible physical self, and you, the non-tangible, bigger self, God. And perhaps in reaching that in the afterlife or after this is gone, there might be salvation. And so we've given you this map so that you can follow it to get to this place. And we've kind of done the math for you, right? So you have an understanding of how to traverse. Where spirituality is, you are creating your own roadmap for yourself by your experience that you're having, which both of them are trying to express the relationship between yourself, the physical self, and the non-physical self. So spirituality is a self-discovery, self-expression, where you decide, is this a one-way street or a two-way street? Do I stop here or can I go through here? And the other thing that I've heard religion called is a cult plus time. If you take a cult and you take enough time together, that makes a religion. And usually there's someone at the head who is saying, this is how it goes. They're interpreting what it is, which I think is useful because I think it answers a lot of questions that people have. And so when you have those questions, you can look in a book or you can look to a leader and go, okay, guide me, tell me how. Spirituality is more your own discovery that could be influenced from the religion that you were a part of or that you've seen or whatnot, but it might be even more because you're walking the terrain. And I think what happens a lot of times, why religion or spirituality kind of gets a bad rap, is that we start to confuse the map for the terrain. The map says this. It says, go this way, you're supposed to. And it's like, well, and then another religion goes, well, we don't agree with that anymore. And now they break off and they start to design their own roadmap that says, you can go this way, you can go that way. But I think at the end, or how they're similar, is really just the understanding or answering the question, is there something bigger than myself? And what is it? What is that relationship? And how do I experience it? So I definitely believe, as Vedic meditation teachers, that when I teach a student, this may lead to them having that journey and discovery, but it also may not. There might be a person who learns how to meditate and is not any more interested in their own spiritual development than they were before or after, so I don't really equate them as being. Do I think Vedic meditation is a spiritual practice? It could be. Do I think I'm more spiritual because I teach Vedic meditation? Perhaps. And the funny thing is, like, to compare spiritualities, like your spirituality is greater than someone else's, or you have a higher degree of it. It's like, what is that necessary? And then, I was raised Catholic, and there was and I was an altar boy, and things of that nature, and I believed a lot of it, and then it took me a long time to go, wait, why do I even believe that? And then to understand religion, to know that there's the King James version of the Bible, different interpretations of the Bible, was about power. You know what I mean? And then this king wanted to be able to do other things, so they removed this part of the Bible. So now religion has this whole different roadmap and whatnot. And it's like, I don't know that I want to even go down that whole road. So if you call it spirituality, cool. If you call me a spiritual leader, I guess I'm okay with that. I wouldn't put myself in that box. But I think having more conversations like this is going to be helpful, because I think people do come to meditation wanting to be more spiritual. And so that's one of the questions. Will you help me? Can this practice help me become more spiritual, or I see you as a spiritual person. How did you get there? Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So I think I need to open my mind to that a bit more.
It's one of those ones where that is one of the many, many reasons that people come, along with, I want to sleep better, I want to be less materialistic, I want to be able to run faster, I want to be able to focus more at work, I want to be, more present with my family, whatever it might be. And, as we teach, all of those things can happen through the same technique. And it's really about how we decide as individuals and as teachers to what our niche is, I guess. And you could be the sage on the stage going, be more spiritual, come my way, I've got my robes on, I've got my big white beard. You would have all noticed Anthony's big white beard growing.
It's been reduced. It's been reduced. I had it cut today.
Oh, okay.
50% of it came off. So I'm no
You've
longer
decided.
heading for Father Christmas. I'm heading in the other direction.
This is the guide on the side. It was getting too flamboyant to look
That
at.
was lockdown lazy. Anyway, that's my
Apologies for those listening on the podcast only without the visual. Oh no, I was enjoying it last week. It was big and bushy.
It was taking on a life of its own. It was unmanageable. I had to tame it. But anyway, Rory, you're making a good point. Carry on.
Yeah, so it's about, meditation has all these benefits, one of which is being more, inverted commas, spiritual, and it's really about how we decide we want to present it, because it's going to make you more what people think is spiritual, but it's also going to make you sleep better. It's also going to make your blood pressure go down, and it becomes about which bit of it you want to promote to different people. And that's why I liked when I do intro sessions, I like doing them in small groups or one-on-one, so I can start by saying what are you looking for. That's the number one question. I don't say a thing until I've said that, because depending on what they say, we can talk about completely different stuff, and it's because it does help all these different things, but it's which bit is going to interest you enough to get into it. And maybe that is, I want to be able to concentrate better at work so I can beat all the other salespeople in my team. And that's fair enough. If that's what gets you into it, then fair enough. But yeah, and it becomes, what do we want? Because you can't be everything to everyone. It's kind of up to the teacher. And that's why, different teachers will appeal to different people. And we know that there are more woo-woo teachers than others, and teachers who'll talk about God consciousness in an intro talk, and there's teachers who won't. And it's kind of, that's the beauty of there being different teachers, is different students will gravitate towards different people, but it's all there, and you will likely get a flavor of all of it, but it's what's going to inspire you to take that first step.
Well, to throw a wrench into all of this, are you guys of the opinion that, Vedic wisdom or Vedic philosophy or our tradition is religious in its nature? Because if you look up Veda, people will talk about it, the Vedic religion. And even in the first day that we spend with our students, that puja ceremony that we perform, many people, myself included, first time witnessing would go, this is definitely a religion. It has religious iconography or things that are going on that you would see in another religion. So I'm curious, now that we're talking about spirituality and religion, do you think what we do could be looked at as religious?
Well, it's very interesting because, so our Maharishi's teacher, Guru Dev, was the Pope of India, like the biggest Hindu saint. And it is very interesting that, I guess my interpretation of it is Maharishi went to the West to get people interested in it, but kind of without that religious element. And it's more about, I guess, the way we talk about is replacing the word God with consciousness. And you can interpret that word consciousness however you want. But this is where it's interesting, because we don't talk about that, and we say, look, you don't have to hold any beliefs, but it does happen to to come from that. Mindfulness comes from Buddhism, which is religion. It's very hard to deny that that was the root of any of them. We may choose to select a certain part of it which we find useful, and that is the part that goes, let's look within. And that's kind of this core of, I think the interesting thing about religion is it starts as a spiritual thing of this internal mystical experience you have on your own, and then becomes kind of codified, where someone's like, I had this experience, you could have it too, and this is what it means. But if we strip that all away, I think it's really interesting, because you're giving people the original experience to kind of decide how they want it to be. And it's this time alone, and it's in that time alone you'll find whatever you're going to find. And we have meditation, but Christianity has prayer, which you can kind of say it's that time to connect with something bigger than yourself, whatever you describe that as. What I often say, or we often say, it's the big version of you, brackets God, if you want to call it that. It's just interesting how we all skirt around it. But definitely the Guru Dev thing, and it is in parts kind of indistinguishable from Hinduism, which is a made-up word anyway.
Right. But when we talk about like the divine, and we use the word holy, and things of this nature, it's interesting always too. And then it begs the question again, well, what is religion really?
Well, I think what we're doing is that so many people are taking the present landscape and looking back at Vedic meditation and the Vedantas and the Vedic worldview, which has been, we have archaeological evidence that shows that it, was a highly sophisticated civilization up in northwest India, in the Indus Valley, which is where Pakistan is now. It existed in 6,000 years ago. I mean, you can go to the British Museum and look at remnants from the archaeological digs of the 1920s, 1923. And this was a sophisticated society, as sophisticated as Mesopotamia, Urs, or the Egyptians, with underground water systems and sewerage and so on and so forth. And, so far we haven't discovered anything older than that, which has a belief system. And what I find particularly fascinating in the puja ceremony, and for those of our audience who don't know what this is, it's a short ceremony. It's very beautiful. It's about 6 minutes long, and it's performed in Sanskrit, the ancient Vedic language. And there is incense, and there are candles, and there is water, and there is fruit, and there are flowers. But this has been used ever since this started. And what's fascinating is when you see in our little ceremony, which is not religious, and we'll come to that in a minute, but when in our little ceremony water is sprinkled and incense is waved, well, look around at the religions that exist today which use water and incense. The Catholic Church, Anglican Church. Where did they get it from? Okay. Without doubt, it all comes, and there are many, many aspects of the particular rituals which are incorporated in contemporaneous religions seem to come from a common source, which quite probably is the Vedic tradition. But religion, as Rory was saying, or was hinting at, is a codified form of behavior, but also highly structured. Most religions have a quite a prescriptive structure to it. And if you want to join, you have to perform, behave, fit in accordingly. And if you don't, or if you fit in for a while and then you start going off track, then you possibly get excommunicated or banished. And so we don't have anything like that. As Rory was saying, this is kind of open. It's, if you like, you could describe it as individual religion, each person doing their own thing. We don't, we unlike other meditation techniques that are available, we don't have a vertical structure. We don't have a hierarchy. We're lateral. We're a cooperative, if you like, of like-minded people. And yes, there'll always be one or two people at the top, who will step forward to take over the administration and to perhaps set some guidelines, people with experience. Thank goodness for that, otherwise it would be a bit of a mess. But I emphasize to my students that this is not a religion, and that the puja ceremony is not religious. We may be using the names of some of the most prominent teachers in the tradition going way back, and the purpose of that is to acknowledge the significant contribution that they have made in an oral tradition that's been passed down for millennia. And it's our way of saying thank you. And the student just witnesses it. It's us saying thank you, that through all those many, many years when India was under oppression, when it had been invaded by Alexander the Great and the Muslims and then the British and so on and so forth, it still managed to survive because it was always oral. It was never written down, so nobody could find the evidence to prosecute. And here we are today still teaching it as an oral tradition, which is fantastic. But I don't think that makes it a religion. And I think that going back to the important point that Rory was making is that this is something that you discover yourself, that, we set ourselves, we as teachers set the student onto the road. We give them the map, as you were talking about, Derrick. And then everybody's terrain is slightly different.
Mm.
We give them, in a way, it's a little bit like a compass rather than a map. That's the direction you want to sort of be heading in. But you may take some diversions. You may go down, you may go up, you may swing off, you may get attracted to go off and do something over there for a while and then come back. But that's the sort of direction which, if you maintain your meditation practice, you will just inevitably move forward in that way.
It's the interesting, talking about the puja, with TM doing a lot of teaching in schools in the States. I've read about some parents, because the States is, I guess, more Christian than many other Western countries, and having this puja ceremony in schools where it talks about the teachers, but it compares them to Hindu deities, like Vishnu, like Shiva, with qualities like Shiva, and you can see why people of a Christian faith may not like their kids going through that, which is, and it's not it's not like a mindfulness thing where you can go, right, I'm just making this very corporate and not traditional at all. You're going, look, I'm waving incense around. This looks like a religious ceremony. So it's there's definitely that's a hard one to kind of walk that line of saying, well, it's not religion, but it being something that's very old, it inevitably is intertwined with religion because much of the past was intertwined with religion. It's a very kind of delicate line to walk.
I think there's definitely overlay. They overlay each other, or they have a lot of resemblance of one in the other. Or if, we could, like, the question always becomes too, okay, what would I have to do to make it a religion? You know what I mean? What is religion? Yeah, because that's the other thing too, is like, there are how many thousands of religions, and any one of us could start our own religion today. We get whatever we need to do. And so it's kind of a slippery slope in a way, because I believe that there are priests and monks in the Vedic tradition. So that sounds very religious. And we might be taking it for our own purposes and just saying, and just by way of saying, okay, it's not religious, maybe makes it not religious. You know what I mean? But I think that's why these words, religion and spirituality, have all of these connotations already, that if we said nothing and we just performed puja, let's say, or we did some whatever, and we just had people watch, I wouldn't be surprised if they were like, oh, that's a religious ceremony going on. Do you know what I mean? It would not at all be of any surprise. Same thing if I were to witness something similar to what I'm doing, or, being in India, watching people practicing their own religion or their own spirituality. It's around you all the time, going down to the Ganges and giving thanks and doing all of these things. It feels like a very religious / spiritual place to be. And I don't know that it's really important to make those distinctions either, especially for me. There was part of me that felt like I had to denounce Catholicism, and then there was another part of me that just says you don't even have to consider it anymore. It doesn't matter, But being baptized, having your first communion, confirmation, you're going through all of these things that say you're kind of saying, oh, I am this thing. You're kind of taking on this identity as well. So I think it's just. That's why I try to kind of stay away from both of those things.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a provocative question. When you, for example, are flying into a country and you get given a landing card to fill out, and it says religion. What's your religion? What do you put down?
I don't remember ever being asked my religion.
Or maybe not on a landing card anymore, but there are certain occasions when you're asked, what is your religion?
You know what? It's a great question. I often refer to myself as non-denominational. I don't belong to any denomination. I don't say that I'm agnostic. I don't say that I don't belong to a domination. I don't identify with this title of whatever. Because I guess that question almost as asking, do you believe in God? What is your affiliation to God? Kind of a thing.
We recently had a census, which I can't remember however many years it has to take place, but it just happened a couple of weekends ago. And it's very specific, and it's really just asking who is in this property on this particular night. You might have relatives staying there. Who are they? Their ages, their professions, and their religion. And every time this is done, one of the biggest religions that is put down is Klingon from Star Trek. We have more people who say they're Klingons than
really
Christians, Muslims, Jews.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, they're just having fun. So I'm going to ask another question. There's one word, one concept that we just haven't spoken about, and that is faith. Where does faith fit into all of this?
Great question. The best definition I've heard or come across of what faith to me is belief without evidence. So if you have faith in something, you are not in need of proof for it to be true or to become true. I have faith that I'm going to make it from here to there. I don't know that. I don't have any evidence. But my belief system tells me it's possible without evidence needing to be presented to me.
But are you talking about trust?
Well, I think
you could have, in your description just now, we could have replaced the word faith with the word trust, and it would have meant the same thing.
Yes, however, I think if I had built trust, my trust would have been built on my experience from the past. I trust you because you have given me evidence of doing this. I no longer trust you because you've given me evidence that you cannot. My faith, however, my belief or my faith in God it doesn't require that at all for me.
But you could use trust as part of your faith. Or is faith only based on the lack of experience? It's the eternal hope.
So faith, I think, too, doesn't necessarily have to be. So there's blind faith, right? It's kind of like saying the same thing. When we say that person has blind faith, it means without witnessing, without knowing, without questioning, they believe blindly. This is what it is. But if I use the word faith, I have faith in this thing. What I'm saying is, I don't know for sure. I haven't done the math, yet I believe it to be. And so I have faith in my ability. I don't know that I can do it, but I think that I can. Trust, I guess, is similar. I guess it could be synonymous. I trust that this is going to happen. But I would need evidence in order to trust you. I don't know if I can trust you. Or you've broken my trust. I trusted you, but now the evidence tells me you are untrustworthy.
I think it's an even spikier word that if we had faith on our websites, it would put even more people off. And it's definitely something I say to people on day one. I'm like, I'm not asking you to take anything on faith. I'm going to give you a procedure to have this internal experience. And then it's up to you to check in what the evidence is for you. Does it make you feel calmer? Does it make you feel more relaxed? Does it give you access to greater creativity? Does it make you sleep better? What's your personal evidence? Because you're not going to do it unless you have personal evidence to motivate you to do it. And I'm not going to say it works, full stop, have faith.
No, but what's interesting about what you've just said is I'll often say sometimes a decision like this requires a leap of faith, meaning you don't have the evidence yet. And in order to get it, you may have to believe first. You may have to, taking that leap of faith means I don't know, but I believe that it's possible. And faith would really mean I believe that it is possible, or that it is not possible, that it is. And that's the thing. Sometimes, we have students who skeptical, don't want to do it. And sometimes they become our biggest champions because they took that leap of faith. I talk about that story about they weren't there, they weren't ready. And they finally, when they did, all these other amazing things.
But they took that leap of faith, perhaps, because they trusted you.
Absolutely. Or they just want to satisfy their own curiosity.
But they trusted you, not some faith thing, like some external deity.
Right, yeah, totally.
I think, the other important aspect of Vedic meditation is that, its experience is so much more important than discussion,
Exactly.
I think it was Maharishi who said, talk is overrated. I think he also said that about thinking and talking is over. I can't remember. I got that muddled up. But talking is overrated. We don't want to keep talking about it. And the irony is, here we are on a podcast. We were just before we went live tonight. We were just saying, wow, this is our 30th episode. And here we are talking, jabber, jabber, jabber. It's conversation. So we must laugh at ourselves at this particular point. But it is, as I was saying to some people today, we can talk about this lots, and we can have fascinating conversations. And as a teacher, I learn something every time I'm in front of a student. That's one of the thrills of teaching, that I'm expanding my knowledge, my understanding, increasing my consciousness, if you like, through the generosity of them turning up and being open about their reactions and feelings. But in the end, we can put all this aside, because all they have to do is actually meditate. And, I make this point very strongly, that we can talk about it forever, but in the end, that doesn't help. What you've actually got to do is close your eyes for 20 minutes twice a day. That's what's going, that's the important bit. And we can talk about it a little bit later, but the doing of it is so much more important than the talking about it. And I think, by about the fourth day of the course, they've kind of they understand that, because suddenly, there's that wonderful moment when the penny drops, and you see, the student was struggling on the first day, but then on the second day, they turn up and they've got this smile from ear to ear, and they look 10 years younger, and you just know that they went home and did a little bit of homework meditation on their own, and they got it. And I get so excited about it. I go, yes, isn't it easy? That's all you had to do. You just had to surrender to the process, and look what happens. Now, all you have to do is just repeat that. You won't necessarily have the same experience, but all you got to do is just set yourself up and do it again. And, do this for 60 days, and you will find some extraordinary things are beginning to happen. No drama, just sequential elaboration. It's just all gracefully following on one step to the next.
Just briefly going back to your question about the census and putting what religion you are, I remembered, because my girlfriend's Hindu, when we fly, there's an option of, do you have a food dietary preference? And we always tick, I'll have the Hindu meal, please, which is a great tip, because one, you get it up to 45 minutes before everyone else, because it's a special meal. And two, it's normally like a delicious curry.
Yeah. Yummy.
So, hot tip for you, go for the Hindu meal.
Done.
Okay, thanks for sticking around until the end. Now, this is the last episode of this season, but we would love to know what topics and themes would be of interest to you for next season. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us with a direct message on Instagram, or by emailing us at stories@thevediconversation.com. And if you enjoyed this episode or this season, please give us a rating or review so that other people can find us. And we'll see you next season.